Oh, this was in July, the best time of the year, actually.
But probably still
in
very
fact,
cold.
we spent July the 4th, America's, what do they call that great day? America's
Independence Day.
Independence Day. We were actually then in Cornwall sailing. And yes, that's where we were then. And although it was the best time of the year for abandoning ship, nevertheless, when we were in the boats later on, I mean, we had snowstorms and so on to give you an idea of the temperature. And in fact, it was cold enough that our men's feet were going black from frostbite. It was real suffering, I can assure you.
And how long were you in that boat?
10 days in the boats. We landed on the island called Nova Zembla, but see, we got heavily attacked, these planes, but they kept high because we had good defense aboard the ship. We had Navy men aboard this ship, and we had, and they were servicing rockets. And these German planes were certainly shy of those rockets, which would burst at all different heights. And we had a Navy man with us. But even the Dutchmen, because as you know, there's always criticism between different nationalities, and the British weren't doing what they could have been doing. But our Dutchmen were even saying we take our hats off to those men there, those Navy men who we had, young men, of course, who were putting up such a defence with everything they had against these German planes. They stuck it out for so long. It was a real battle, actually. And anyway, but eventually we getting bombed also. No direct hit, but enough to get the ship sinking. And so until it came to it that the engines were stopped now, and then the hoots and the whistle of the signal for abandon ship and so on, and we abandoned ship. And I remember one man, he was the chief steward. We all knew where we had to go. I had to go to a certain lifeboat to lower the lifeboat. We all had different tasks. And I remember this chief steward there, standing there absolutely, he turned to stone from, as if he was in a dream doing everything. I remember that well. I myself doing my job, I knew exactly, and I had all my senses all right, but wondering if the next moment you'd be blown to eternity. That's how it was. But anyway, we lowered the boats and we got into them eventually. And there we were for 10 days. We came alongside, or a ship came alongside us, an American ship came alongside us offering to take us aboard. But a quick conference amongst the officers, no, we will get our second lot will be worse than our first lot. That if we got sunk there on that ship, I mean, it'd be worse than our condition where we were. And so we were in the boat, and there we were, and we had some Russians with us, also had come with us as passengers actually, who had already been sunk going to Britain. And we had taken them back to Russia with us, and they gave us some advice as well, and eventually it was decided we'd sail towards Nova Zembla in the boats. And the sails were up, and in Nova Zembla we eventually reached, but it was 10 days going there was like, it was 350 miles we sailed. It was like 10 years.
Would the lifeboat have had an engine?
Yes, indeed. I think one of them would have had, at least one of them would have had a motor, yes. Yes.
You didn't have to row or sail then?
Sometimes, for some reason, when the wind had dropped, they got us rowing, but dear me, what energy did we have? We weren't eating anything except now and again a hard biscuit, like a dog's biscuit, you know. And also water. We were short of water, and though cold, we still wanted to drink. but somebody had put his foot through the little keg that we had there, and there were two of them, fortunately, two of those little kegs. One of them was broken, and the water had all run out to be short of water too. For I remember that when it was snowing, they were scraping the snow off the sails to try to get that as fresh water to melt down. And when we got eventually to Nova Zemlya, these Russians knew that if we sailed around far enough, we would eventually, it's an uninhabited island actually, big island, very long, it's almost as long as Britain, I think, that there, here and there would be fur hunters and settlements along the coast. See, well, we sailed and sailed along that until we eventually did indeed come to one of those, and that's for the first time we went ashore, and they had a radio transmitter, and they were in touch then with a plane that came over now and again, and they were able to pass on the information that they had picked up a crew of a sunken ship, you see. And in any case, somehow or another, we were put onto a Russian coaster. This coaster took us to an American ship which was up against the ice floors, couldn't go any further, up against the ice. And the ship had been painted white to avoid detection. And so we were on board that ship, and we had something to eat there. Then later on again, we were sent to a British ship, which was also in the same sort of situation, couldn't go any further, it was up against the ice, and it escaped somehow detection from the Germans. And we were there several days, and then they decided to take a run for it, to try to get to Russia. And so they cast anchor and off they went. We did get to Russia, and we got to Archangel. And so in Archangel, there we were for 2 months, and we were housed in a school there. There were hundreds of survivors there in Archangel, seafaring men, and also, as we understood, there were many poor shipwrecked Virgin Navy men in the hospitals too, some of them without limbs from the ultimate effect of frostbite. Yeah.
From what you've outlined, there's a tremendous contribution from the Merchant Navy to the outcome of the war.
Mm. Yes, well, apart from those who actually flew in the Air Force, such as observers and gunners and pilots, well, there were only one in 4 survived, that I understand to be the statistics. And next to that, the Merchant Navy had the highest percentage of losses. Mm. Yeah, so that is just true.
Mm. They faced danger in a magnificent manner, I thought.
Yeah, I met many who find that 3 times meeting up with disaster quite remarkable, because there are those amongst them also who saw nothing at all. But those ships that I sailed on, the Dutch ships, and as I said, I read in a volume given to me by a friend of mine in Holland, but of the history in Dutch, of course, of the Dutch Merchant Navy in the Second World War, and all the ships were mentioned that got sunk by enemy action, and all the ships that I was on, they all eventually got sunk. Also the Dutch ships that I was not that I survived on, that didn't get sunk, but eventually they did. Especially now the German ship that I mentioned, I came back from South Africa. Now that ship had a large crew of Chinese, and they got sunk, so was noted in this book of the history. They got sunk out in the Pacific, and there was a great loss of life with that ship. More than half of the large crew all got wiped out, and they were shelled as I was on the first occasion,
Well-
shelled by one of these Q ships or whatever they call them.
Well, many brave men died, and you faced death too.
Yes.
Did that have anything to do with you becoming eventually a committed Christian?
I always thought, well, you know, I would say I seriously, that first time I got sunk, and I was up on the gun platform all on my own, as I said, the man who was in charge, not a Dutchman, but a man from Newport. He was supposed to be the gunner, and he should have been up there first, but I was up there all on my own, and I can't understand why it was I was on my own, but I remember seeing all that going around me, and it did look a rather hopeless situation, and the ship getting shelled and all these bullets flying about, that I went down on my knees and I said, "Oh God, get me out of this." Of course, that is our kind of prayers, isn't it? Look after me. But I do believe it was the hand of God, though, just the same, that got me out of it, yes.
You said right at the start of this conversation there was nobody who was a committed Christian in the family. At least your father, you said, possibly was possibly an atheist. But
no, it wouldn't be fair to call him an atheist. It's just that he did nothing at all with it.
But when do you reckon that you got converted then?
Oh, I see. Ah, yes, so that's it. It's not so much being frightened that will convert you, but rather such things as bring you to see your own wretchedness, your undeservedness. And I think when we look at the goodness of God, it should have that effect upon us too, and especially in my case, I can see that in spite of being quite a young drunkard in my time, a curser, swear, a blasphemer, that I met a boy on a ship called the Latimer. And this is very interesting because Latimer, this ship was named after Bishop Latimer, who was a true Protestant during the time of persecutions in England. And he was burnt at the stake with Bishop Ridley. And he is the man with that famous saying, have good courage, Master Ridley, for God shall light such a candle in this day, that by his grace shall never be put out. And strange enough, I joined this cable ship called the Latimer. And on board that same Latimer was another Hugh Ross, with a very good Bible knowledge, although he was only 19 years of age, and he was very committed. He was not ashamed to own his Lord, and of course I got speaking to him. I thought first of all, when I heard that there's a Bible basher on board, because we were joining a new ship and a bigger crew than I was used to. And before we got to know one another, I heard that there was someone aboard the ship known as the Bible puncher. And so I was very interested to come across him, and indeed it wasn't long, of course, that I saw him standing somewhere, and he had a little badge on which was written, "You must be born again. Mae rhaid eich geni chwydrach heaven." And I knew nothing about these things then. So I asked him, what does that mean? I thought perhaps he was a spiritist or something. And he explained to me that that's in the Bible, that the Lord Jesus Christ had said, "For verily I say unto you, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God." Well, anyway, I got talking to him a lot, you see, afterwards. And that is really what led to my conversion. And the last pub that I was really drinking in, I'm not saying it's the last pub I've been in, but I'm saying the last pub that I was boozing in was called the Jolly Jack on the banks of the Thames. We were tied on the the boys at Woolwich. And I said to this boy, I said, oh, I'll come ashore with you one day. And indeed, well, I didn't go ashore with him that day at all. I went in the evening. I went ashore with the lads, you know, and there we were in the Jolly Jack, boozing away there. And yet I myself wasn't feeling jolly anymore, because I was thinking about what he said, I've been told. Behold, now is the day of salvation, and all of this sort of thing is from the Bible. And I began to get quite anxious. I thought, dear me, what if I was to get cut off suddenly, and so on. But in any case, I was convinced, after arguing with him, he's right. And I was convinced now, he's right. There's no choice to me but to go the Christian way. And I remember standing up, although I'd well drunk, and telling all the others, quite bold because of having drunk as well, of course. And I told them, this is the last time that you'll ever see me in a dive like this. And of course they laughed it off, you know. And I came back aboard that ship, and I know that there's a bit of a scrap broke out as well. And coming out of that atmosphere, went down to our accommodation, and there was my newfound friend lying back, although late in the night, reading his Bible. Well, what a contrast! It was around that little area of his. It was so peaceful. He was reading his Bible, and I said to him, "Do you know I love you?" Although I'd had a few now, of course, and I wouldn't have talked like that otherwise. But he saw then that what he'd been telling me was getting home to me. And so I did indeed go ashore with him. And we went, and he said, he asked me, you know, in the terminology that they used to use, and maybe still do, would you be prepared to give your heart to the Lord? And I said, yes. And of course, because he thought I didn't understand what he meant, he began to explain. And then he said, well, listen, we'll go to the Seaman's Home. We were still in London, you see, alongside. And he said, so we'll go to the Seaman's Home, and they got a little chapel there, and there perhaps we could pray together. So we went there, and there I kneeled down with him, and he prayed for me. Then he said, say your prayer in your own words now, he said, and tell God you're sorry for all your sinfulness. And anyway, I stuttered something out, you know, I don't know what. But I got up, and he told me, oh, he said, you're my brother now. I said, what? Yeah. You're born again. Do you know that? He says in his Scots way. I said, well, I didn't feel anything. But one thing, although I didn't feel anything, I knew that I'd made a choice. And I knew also that I'd said this before God, that I would follow him. And so I'd made up my mind then that I'll stick with him now. I'm sure he will teach me a few more things. But then after a few days, indeed, I knew something tremendous had happened in here. And I knew, indeed, I thought to myself, just as he said, my whole thought life and everything was raised to a higher level. And I thought, well, indeed, I must be what he said, born again. That was that. Anyway, and thank God that's a long time ago now. And thank God that I've kept that way, or I've been kept rather. And also now I've married a Christian young woman, then later on. And I have 5 children and 15 grandchildren, and they all go to a place of worship. And I thank God that we have not come into the awfully sad situations that so many unchurched people have come into with their own family unions with their wives and with their children.
Charles Davies, has been a fascinating story, and thank you so much for sharing it with the Wales Video Gallery.
All right, it's a pleasure to do so. I'm glad that it ends up on such a happy note of serving God with all of this.